Prepare for a true revolution.
Actually, you can prove God exists.
Questioning tradition, because what you've been taught isn't always true.
The truth will set
Welcome to Truth Revolution. This is where faith and reason meet. I am Dave, and with me is Pastor Jeff of Revolution Church.
That's right, and I'm here with Pastor Dave.
Yep.
Newly minted pastor, only a month and a half old. So
my best baby.
That's right. All right. But yeah, he is the associate pastor here at Revolution Church. We meet at 9 a.m., 11 a.m., and 5 p.m. in Salina, Kansas. We also stream online. If you're listening to this later, make sure you get to our website, truthrevolution.tv, to check out our service times because we're going to be adding more.
Right.
Maybe, I don't know. We need to get into a bigger building. Anyway,
it's getting packed.
Anyway, we got a great show today. We're going to be talking about aliens. We're going to be talking about life-forming molecules. We're going to answer Bible contradictions.
So we're going to get all knowledgey and stuff.
We're going to get all... Yes, I love the fact that we use fake words to describe. We're going to get all knowledgey, and we're going to do like scientismic stuff. So
works for me.
Right on. And we have a very special guest with us who's been here multiple times before, but we always love to have him and anyone from their organization back. We have Hugh Ross. He's the founder and president of Reasons to Believe.
Astronomer and best-selling author Hugh Ross travels the globe speaking on the compatibility of advancing scientific discoveries with the timeless truths of Christianity. His organization, Reasons to Believe, is dedicated to demonstrating via a variety of resources and events that science and biblical faith are allies, not enemies.
Yeah, that's it. We say where faith and reason meet, and they're saying science and biblical faith are allies. Hey, thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Ross.
Hey, my pleasure.
Love to have you on the show. Always love to have you here.
Yeah.
And by the way, everyone, I got a huge list of books here that he has written, just a massive list here. Creator in the Cosmos, one of my favorite books of all time. The Fingerprint of God, good one. I'm not going to go through the whole list because they're all good, Dr. Ross. They're all really good books. We also just had Dr. Rana Fuzz with us talking about your new book. Just right before we get into our discussion for today, tell us a little bit about the new book that you guys just released not too long ago.
Yeah, that's a book on dinosaur blood that Fuzz wrote.
Yeah.
And basically makes the point that the discovery of soft tissue parts in dinosaurs and even more ancient fossils doesn't mean that they are young. Literally, that material can survive for millions of years, even hundreds of millions of years, if you find some way to cut off the oxygen and the bacterial attack. So if it's in an encased bone, for example, it can be preserved for a long time. Nevertheless, the DNA will be sufficiently corrupted that we're not going to be able to have a Jurassic Park scenario.
Oh,
man. Well, it's cool anyway.
Not maybe the woolly mammoths, but not dinosaurs.
Right. So,
but nevertheless, their soft tissue can be well preserved for a long period of time, which means we really have an opportunity to gain some significant insights into major events that challenge the evolutionary paradigm, especially the soft tissue we recover from the Cambrian and Avalon explosions.
Yeah, that's awesome stuff. Now, if you want to know more about that, you just go to truthrevolution.tv. We did a show, I think that was 3 weeks ago.
Ish.
Just type in dinosaur blood, or you can go to reasons.org, their website, and get the book as well. But we're going to hit two topics today. The main one we want to talk about is aliens. But before we get into aliens, the likelihood that they would exist, what are some of these encounters really? We just noticed there's some headlines going around. You've probably seen these as well, about this organic molecule in space. And when a non-scientist here, they found organic molecules in space. And actually, this article, I'm reading this article. This is from Peter Dockel from ScienceAlert.com. He says, for the first time ever, scientists have detected a complex organic molecule called a chiral molecule in interstellar space. So when I hear organic molecule, you know what I'm thinking. I'm thinking they found life in space. What's really going on?
Keep in mind, hydrogen cyanide is considered an organic molecule.
Oh, wow.
Molecule that's got hydrogen, carbon, nitrogen, or oxygen in it, that's called an organic molecule. And the molecule they discovered is propylene oxide. And this was announced yesterday in the journal Science. So this is cutting edge. And it's the first chiral molecule that they've been able to find in a naturalistic source. They found it in a dense molecular cloud near the center of our galaxy. It's a cloud that's been responsible for the discovery of over 130 complex carbonaceous molecules. But this is the first one they found that is chiral. Now, it's not a biological building block molecule. It's not an amino acid. It's not a nucleotide. It's not one of the sugars that are necessary for making DNA and RNA, but it is a chiral molecule. And what I mean by a chiral molecule, it's a molecule that comes in two different configurations, where some of the atoms are on the left-hand side of the molecule, and in other cases, they're on the right-hand side.
Okay.
So, for example, 19 of the 20 bioactive amino acids are chiral. In other words, some of them are left-handed and some of them are right-handed. Now, what's important about this, if you want to make proteins, all the amino acids have to be left-handed. You can't have a mixture of right and left. They all have to be left.
Okay.
And if you want to be able to build DNA and RNA, the connecting ribose sugars all have to be right-handed. And so far, we have yet to detect a naturalistic source of ribose or any of the amino acids or any of the nucleotides of the building blocks of RNA and DNA. What's exciting here is they said, well, we actually have found a non-bioactive chiral molecule. And what got all the excitement on the web? People thought, well, they've actually found molecules that are all left-handed or all right-handed. That's not the case. That's not what they found. They simply detected a molecule that actually comes in both the left and right-handed configuration. And if you read to the end of the paper, and this is what I tell people, before you get excited about a web article, always look for the peer-reviewed paper in which it's based. And here's the good news. You can always access the abstract of any published paper free of charge. Charge for the paper, but in this case, you can get the whole paper for free. And if you read through to the end of the paper, here's a direct quote.
Okay.
We cannot determine whether such an EE exists in the case of propylene oxide. And what they mean by EE is an enzymatic excess. In other words, they were unable to determine whether there was anything other than a 50-50 mixture of left or right. And what we recognize is that there is no naturalistic mechanism for taking a chiral molecule and making it 100% left or 100% right-handed, which is crucial if you want to have a model for the origin of life. There's no way you can get life unless you can find some mechanism to make all the amino acids left-handed and all the ribose sugars right-handed. And by the way, we haven't even detected ribose outside of a living or once living system. Nor have we detected any of the amino acids in these intermolecular clouds.
So really, although this is a very, very cool discovery of this this molecule, it isn't really a building block to life in the way that a lot of these articles are suggesting it is.
It's not relevant to the origin of life at all, not one bit. This is not one of the bioactive building block molecules. But what generated the excitement is the first time they found, quote, a chiral molecule.
Gotcha.
But they did not find one of the biological chiral molecules. And I'm on record as saying I think we eventually will discover them.
Oh.
The fact is, for 50 years, we've been searching for these molecules. They're not present at more than 1 part per million. Now, because we understand the chemistry in these interstellar molecular clouds, we know that it will produce a few of the bioactive amino acids, not all. I don't think there's any way you can make the complex basic amino acids, but the simple ones, yes, but they're going to come in at parts per billion, and they're not going to be 100% left-handed. They're going to be a mixture of left and right.
So
and
we'll be able...
That's useless for the origin of life.
I see. So you think we'll be able to find some of these most basic building blocks for life, but nothing other than just a few elements or molecules?
Well, for example, they've yet to find glycine, which is the simplest of the bioactive amino acids. And it's not even chiral. It only has 10 atoms in it. They have yet to find that. Now, I do think they will find it, but it's going to be at very low abundance levels.
Cool.
And there's about a dozen of the bioactive amino acids I don't think they're going to find at all, like tryptophan, for example. We don't know of any mechanism, naturalistic mechanism, that's going to make tryptophan.
Interesting. And this actually does, I mean, we could probably spend the entire 45 minutes on this alone because it really leads into the probability and statistics behind how life could be created, all that, which is phenomenal. But
let me cut to the bottom line on that. If you don't have a naturalistic scenario that gives you at least the building blocks, you do not have a naturalistic model for the origin of life. And that's a conundrum. There are no building block molecules outside of living systems.
So although they found chiral molecules, they really have not found the building blocks to life like people would make it sound.
Well, the important caveat, they have found a couple of the amino acids in meteorites.
Okay.
But the latest evidence is telling us that these amino acids form as the meteorite goes through our atmosphere. The heat of the atmosphere actually produces a very low abundance of these amino acids. A couple of the simplest ones we found in comets, but you need all 20 if you're going to have a model for the origin of life. And all we have found are the very simplest ones, and they're all found at extremely low abundance.
Okay, great. Okay, now let's get into this next topic about aliens, because this is the one that we really wanted to get you on here for. This isn't... I just got to start at the outset and say that we've talked about aliens before on our show.
Right.
And we would have no problem with alien existence.
Yeah, if an alien dropped a ship right in my front yard, I mean, I might.
Well, you'd have a problem with it.
Right. I mean, get off my lawn, right? But, I wouldn't have a problem with the fact that aliens exist.
Right.
I might have a problem with them coming out guns loaded for bear, but, if God made man and said, it is good. If God made life here and says it's good, then obviously it's repeatable, and God can do whatever he wants. He's sovereign.
God can put life wherever God wants to put life. That's sure. That's true. But let's go all the way now to UFO sightings. What do you, Dr. Hugh Ross, make of UFO sightings?
Well, I've been processing UFO reports since I was 16 years of age. That's because I was an amateur astronomer before I became a professional. And because I knew the night sky so well, I wound up handling all the UFO reports at every university where I served.
Really?
So I've dealt with, literally thousands of these UFO things. And what I can tell you is 99% of what people have reported to me as UFOs are not real UFOs. In the sense, they're either natural phenomena, they're hoaxes, a lot of hoaxes, or they're secret military aircraft. But there's a 1% residual that doesn't fall into that category. What's interesting about that 1% residual, we have documented evidence that shows that they are real, but also shows that they're not physical. I mean, to give you an example, there are about 2,000 documented cases where observers have seen a UFO crash into the earth. And then you go to the crash site and you can see that the ground is depressed, snow is melted, vegetation is damaged. Yet when you look around that site, there's no debris and no artifacts. Moreover, when the UFO is viewed coming through the atmosphere at velocities of 18 to 25,000 miles per hour, no heat friction with the atmosphere and no sonic boom, which means we're looking at phenomena that's real but not physical. This is a phenomena that's not subject to the laws of physics of our universe.
Okay, now
It explains why my professor, I briefly had Carl Sagan as a professor when I was at the University of Toronto. He was extremely dismissive of UFOs. But the reason why, his worldview would not permit the existence of non-physical reality. So he basically said they're impossible. But as a Christian, I believe in non-physical reality.
Right.
This is a phenomena from beyond space and time.
Okay. He just unloaded something pretty big right there.
Well, we don't have very much time after the break. We're going to have to do some double time.
We're going to do about another 15 minutes after this break, and then we're going to do another 10 or 15 minutes at the end of the show for the podcast listeners only. All right, we're going to take a little break. We're going to come right back. In the meantime, you need to get to reasons.org. That's Dr. Hugh Ross's organization, Reasons to Believe. They got lots of great information, books, and articles there. Get on over to truthrevolution.tv. What do we have there, Dave?
Past shows, got truth shots, and you can donate. We've had plenty of people donate, and we thank you for that.
Yeah.
Keeps us on the air.
It does. Keep us on the air. Make sure that this ministry goes forward and reaches the thousands of people who are listening and growing in their faith, even those of you who decided to follow Jesus. All right, we'll be right back after this.
Truth Revolution.
And we're back. We're talking with Hugh Ross, Dr. Hugh Ross from Reasons to Believe about aliens, of all things.
That's right. And he dropped a bombshell right before we went to the break, and then we had to go to the break, just like true professionals.
Yeah, leave him hanging.
So, all right, he said that these UFOs. I don't want to use the word alien yet. I don't know these UFOs. The 1% that aren't natural phenomenon or hoaxes or military aircraft would actually go into the earth, just kind of disappear. There'd be depression of grass. Okay. Now I understand that this is what people reported. I understand they reported seeing these things. How do you know they're not A, crazy, B, drunk, or C, lying? I mean,
all of the above.
Or all of the above.
Well, because you get sometimes multiple observers. You can actually go to the crash site and you can see that something has happened because the ground is depressed, snow is melted. You look at the vegetation, it looks like it's suffered from some kind of radiation damage. Something happened. Bring about these effects. And yet when you look for debris, there's no debris. If it was an aircraft crashing into the earth, you would have debris. In this case, no debris, no sonic boom, no heat friction as it goes through the atmosphere. And, it was Alan Hynek, the physicist in the 1960s, that looked at this UFO phenomena and classified it into the 5 different kinds of encounters. You may have heard close encounters of the first kind, second kind, third kind, fourth, and fifth. And he said it's these close encounters that you have to take seriously. A close encounter of the first kind is where you come within 500 feet of the observer, so it's really nearby. A close encounter of the second kind is where you actually have physical evidence, like a crash site, with evidence of depression and damage. A close encounter of the third kind is where the human contactee sees a being on board one of these so-called craft. A close encounter of the fourth kind is where there's actual communication between the being or an abduction event. And a close encounter of the fifth kind is where the human contactee suffers bodily injury, and the most extreme situations, they experience death. They're killed by the event.
Wow.
When people get killed, I mean, obviously something's happening.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to come back to that about people getting killed. On these crash sites, how do you know it wasn't just the military coming in and cleaning it up because it was classified and they have to get rid of every nut and bolt?
Well, because sometimes you go to the crash site right after the event took place. So there's no opportunity for a cleanup crew to come by.
Okay.
Moreover, if it's a cleanup crew, they always leave a little bit of evidence. You really can't clean up everything.
Okay.
So, and we're talking thousands, literally over 2,000 documented cases. So there's no way you're going to be able to clean up all 2,000. And especially since most of them, people are going to the site right after the event.
Okay. And so you actually are thinking, some of these alien encounters are legitimate. That would be your...
Well, it's legitimate, particularly when you take into account the harmful effects that these events have on the human contactees. In terms of a close encounter, the best you're going to come away with from the event is recurring terrifying nightmares. As I mentioned, the worst case scenario, you actually get injured. So, something has to explain the deleterious effects that happens to people when they have these close encounters. And also the messages that they get from these beings is really similar, and there's evidence that it evolves with respect to time. The stories aren't the same today as they were 100 years ago. And this is a phenomenon that's been documented to exist for over 3,000 years. So it's not new.
Okay, so these people, you said that some of them have died. I have not heard of this. Why would you make that claim?
Well, mainly because I write in my book, Lights in the Sky and Little Green Men, that there are 7 physicists, none of them believers, who spent more than 10 years studying the UFO phenomenon, actually looking at hundreds of thousands of documented sightings. And what's interesting is how they all come to the same conclusion. Number one, this is a harmful phenomenon. It's not beneficial. The human contactees always suffer harm, and no matter where you go in the world, it's the same kind of harm. And what they document is that there's a one-to-one correspondence to what you see in UFO phenomena and what you see in the occult and witchcraft and demonology.
Really?
What's interesting is these physicists, even though they're not believers, they all say whatever goes on in UFOs is the same thing that goes on in the occult and demonology.
Wow.
And that was which book was that you wrote that in? Oh, The Lights in the Sky and Little Green Men.
Little Green Men.
In 2002. Okay.
Well, the thing I think is important, our book is the only book that is scientifically testable. We kind of lay out our explanation, but we say, here's how you can test whether or not our model is correct. Because our model is we believe that it's the occult that brings us into your life. Well, here's the cure. If you get rid of all the occult in your life, that'll be the end of these close encounters. On the other hand, if you get deeply involved in the occult, don't be surprised if you have UFO encounters. And statistically, those nations of the world where a higher percentage of the population is deep into the occult, a much higher percentage are having these close encounters. And I got to see that personally when I visited the Soviet Union when the communists were running the show. And that was a time when Soviet Russia was trying to get an edge on the West by developing occult weapons. And so their major universities had departments of occult physics. And when I addressed these physicists, I was amazed at how many of them were either demon-possessed or were having these close encounters with UFOs. I'm talking percentages as high as 20 to 40%.
Okay.
The physicists I was addressing. That never happens here in the U.S.
No.
Does happen in those countries where the populace is deep into practicing occult activities.
Okay. You've just blown everyone's mind who's listening to you. We're going to come back to this, and because I know people want to keep going on this, but every single show we answer Bible contradiction, and I have to make sure that we answer one before we leave today, or we're going to get hate mail. So we'll be right back with more aliens. We're going to do this Bible contradiction.
Bible contradiction.
All right, today's Bible contradiction brought to you by aaronc.org. The Synoptic Gospels, that is Matthew, Mark, and Luke, are agreed that a man called Simon of Cyrene was forced to carry the cross of Jesus up to Golgotha where he was crucified. Mark 15:21 says, and they compelled a passerby, Simon of Cyrene, who was coming in from the country, the father of Alexander and Rufus, to carry his cross. On the other hand, this is John 19:17. And he went out bearing his own cross to the place called the place of the skull, which in Aramaic is called Golgotha. So did he carry it himself all the way, or did Simon help him?
Well, this is...
Or did Simon say, carry your own cross, so he had to do it?
Right. On aaronc.org, they list this as one of the top 10 most serious Bible contradictions that exist. They do.
Wow.
I'm very surprised at this because I find this to be one of the easiest contradictions to solve that we've ever had.
I knew you would.
You knew that because you're psychic and you should stop messing with the occult. You're going to get abducted by aliens. All right, so we're gonna solve this with our cracked acronym. The A stands for author's intention. What is the author trying to communicate when they're using these phrases? It's a big deal, right? When I say that Dave is hot, I'm either trying to communicate something about his looks or I'm trying to communicate something about his body temperature.
Right.
You have to know my intention. When I say that Jesus carried his cross, am I intending to communicate that he carried it all the way or not? That's the first question. And then we're going to use our second C, which is credibility. All you have to do is look at this, and every single person who reads this can come up with a really easy example. When it says Jesus went out bearing his own cross, and then the other one says that a passerby who was coming in took the cross, everyone knows what that means. I don't know why this is so hard to solve, right? If you have to give a little credit, you cannot look for contradictions.
Right.
You have to give some credit there, and if you don't understand why it says what it says, you got to go a little deeper. So we're going to give some author's intention here. We're going to give a little credit. It's pretty clear that the author was not John. He was not intending to communicate that Jesus began to carry it and carried it all the way. All he says is, as Jesus went out bearing his own cross, period. I mean, that's all he said. As he went out, he was bearing his own cross. Doesn't mean that someone else didn't take it. Pretty simple. A contradiction would be Simon carried it start to finish versus Jesus carried it start to finish. That would be a contradiction, but that's not what this says. That's a fairly simple Bible contradiction. Dr. Ross, anything you want to add to that about Bible contradictions?
I think you covered it really well, although I can give you another one.
Yeah, go for it.
The 13th century, different Roman Catholic peddlers sold 16 tons of the cross of Jesus. So it really was 16 tons. Neither one of them could have carried the cross.
Right.
Wow.
They carried it together.
There you go. All right. Cool. All right. Here we go. That's the answer for our contradiction today.
Bible contradiction.
That's a heavy cross.
Okay. Let's get back to the alien abductions here. You've mentioned that all of these things that you're familiar with seem to be very similar or linked to the occult somehow. What are a few ways that people get into the occult or start to deal with alien abductions without maybe even realizing they're doing this? Because I doubt every person who has an alien encounter is saying, oh, I want to be possessed by a demon or something like that.
Well, for example, my wife and I years ago did a weekend conference for Christian college students. These were students raised in Christian homes. As we surveyed them, we found that 1/3 of the women had been dabbling in the occult and had no idea.
Wow.
They would have a party, and they a Ouija board is an occult tool. And so what do you think? A Ouija board is a tool for calling up a demon. And so it's like, I think often Christians are not even aware that they've been playing with the occult. Astrological forecasting devices would be another example.
Yeah.
I heard that we had a couple in our home that bought a new house, and there was occult activity going on. But once we destroyed the astrological forecaster that was in a junk pile in their garage, that was the end of occult activity in their house.
Okay, we're going to come back to this on the other side of the break. The show is almost over here. If you're listening on the radio, you have got to get onto the podcast, truthrevolution.tv. I'm going to throw some really hard questions at him about aliens and the occult and whether this is actually real or not. truthrevolution.tv.
Truth Revolution.
And we're online.
Okay, so the podcasters are online with us now. Just listening here, online only. So, okay, let's cut to the chase here. So you said you went to communist Russia or some of these other places, and they were dealing with the occult. And why would you necessarily connect that to alien activity? Could you give me a little more specific evidence in that regard?
Well, these demons are fallen angels, according to the Bible. It can only invade your life if you invite them. It takes invitation. And so different occult activities basically is an invitation for the demons to come into your life. In certain parts of the world, the populace is much more involved in the occult than other parts. So it explains why, for example, Equatorial Brazil, France, North Africa, communist Russia during the 80s, there was a much higher level of people having these UFO encounters, where it was relatively rare here in the United States because the level of occult activity here in the U.S. is much lower. So there's that correlation. There's also a correlation individually. Here in the U.S., you can survey people, and people who have no occult activity in their life don't see these UFOs. I'll give you an example. There are two astronomers I knew who every time they came on the telescope, they saw UFOs. And yet they're only logging about 4 hours of observing time a year. 3 of us graduate students were logging more than 1,500 hours each. We never saw a thing. But it's because the 3 of us were not involved in the occult, where the other 2 were deeply involved in the occult. And when I mention astronomers, I think this is significant. In terms of where people see these close encounters, the most common sight is lonely country roads at 3 a.m. in the morning. Well, guess where our astronomy telescopes are located? Lonely country roads, and we're out there at 3 a.m. in the morning making observations. And yet astronomers have one of the lowest incidence of rates of encounters with UFOs. And yet you would think they would be the highest because they're at the best time and the best place. And so this is another piece of evidence that it's got everything to do with a degree of occult activity in your life. And to me, the proof of the pudding is find an individual who's having these UFO encounters and have them get rid of all the occult in their life. And that's the end of their UFO experiences. These demons can only come into your life if you invite them. Take away the invitation cards, they can't touch you.
Okay, no, so that's interesting. So when you're talking about aliens, you're specifically talking about cultic or demonic activity.
Well, God created two different species of intelligent life. Human beings that are constrained to the physics of the universe, and angelic beings that are not constrained by the physics of the universe. And this is what these physicists who, in addition to me, have studied the phenomena, they say these must be beings that are interdimensional. They come from other dimensions. Beings that live in other dimensions and come into our dimensions and leave. That's their explanation for why the evidence tells us it's real but not physical. And that's what the Bible tells us, that God created angels. And these angels have the power to come into our dimensional realm. They can take any physical form they choose. So it explains why you see leprechaun stories 100 years ago. They can come, quote, as little people. They can come as slow-moving dirigibles like they did 100 years ago. Or they can appear as fast-moving flying saucers, or as human beings, or as animals. Angels can do that kind of thing. And again, I think another piece of evidence, when they do have encounters with human beings, it's always deleterious. The communication is deceptive, and if you get too close, you experience physical harm.
Okay, now here's a challenge to it that just comes to my mind. Right, I'm thinking biblically. I'm thinking about the grass, the impressions, how there is some physical evidence there left when these things would come in there. If you aren't involved in the occultic activity, you apparently can't see these UFOs, but you can see the effects of what happened to them. Now, I'm trying to think, and I don't remember any biblical example of demonic activity where a demon hadn't possessed someone, but had a physical effect on the earth. Does that make sense?
Well, it does. And that's one of the things we notice about the UFO phenomena. It evolves with respect to time. So, for example, 100 years ago, it was slow-moving dirigibles in the lower atmosphere. World War II, they were aircraft moving at the speed of sound. Now there's spaceships and flying saucers moving at 25,000 miles per hour. They're keeping pace with our technology. What Thutmose III saw 3,000 years ago is not the same as what UFO contactees are reporting today. And also the message changes. Consistently, when people have these encounters and they get a message, they're communicating astronomical information. But it changes. 100 years ago, these UFO beings said they were from the backside of the moon. But when the general populace became educated enough to know that that's not a credible site for life, they said, oh, we're from Venus. But when the public realized it's too hot in Venus, they said they were from Mars. Then it was the moons of Jupiter. Now the story you're hearing is that they come from a distant planetary system. And so the fact that they're keeping pace with our technology and our astronomical knowledge, but also the fact that our astronomical knowledge is never accurate. It's always a flawed piece of information. And I think what's most interesting is when the human contactee actually has communication with these beings, especially where you see automatic writing going on, where the human goes into a trance and the demon takes control and there's automatic writing. The books have a consistent message. Probably the most famous of these books is the Urantia book, Urantia. It's a 4,000-page long book, so it's a big, thick book. But a third of the content of the Urantia book is focused on denying the deity of Jesus Christ.
Wow.
Why so much focus on Christianity, and why so much focus on trying to dissuade people from the Christian faith? But this, again, would fit the mission of the fallen angels that we see recorded in the Bible.
Okay, that's interesting. Now, what about life other than this demonic activity? Is there potential for other biological beings in the universe?
Well, I've been on record since 1988 predicting we will find the remains of life on all solar system bodies, for the simple reason that life is so prolific on Earth that every time meteorites strike the Earth of sufficient size, Earth life gets exported throughout the solar system. So, for example, the fossils of Earth's first life have been destroyed by Earth's geology, but I believe they're present in pristine form on the surface of the moon.
Really?
In fact, I spoke at NASA Houston a few years ago and saying, we need to go back to the moon. We need to recover those fossils and see who got it right, the atheists or the theists. And they said, well, how are we going to fund this? And I said, well, last time I checked, 100% of the U.S. population was either a theist or an atheist. So I said, I think both sides have got a vested interest in going to the moon and see who got it right.
Start the fundraiser right here.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, those fossils also exist on Mars, but at a much lower abundance level. They exist in all our solar system bodies. But if you're talking about indigenous extraterrestrial life, like that didn't come here from Earth,
right?
I don't think there's any possibility we're going to find that. Mainly because as we look at these planets outside of our solar system, not only are none of them like Earth, none of them are like any of the solar system planets. And it was us discovering that in astronomy that led us to recognize every planet in our solar system plays a critical role in making advanced life possible here on planet Earth. So the discovery of these 3,000 planets outside of the solar system has actually shown us how amazingly designed our solar system is to make life possible here on planet Earth.
Yes.
If ours wasn't exactly the way it is, we wouldn't be here on Earth today.
Right. You actually have a list that we refer to. And I remember years ago, the list was, I don't remember what it started at. You know, there was 80 things on the list, and then there was 100 things on the list, and then 200. And then at one point, there were 400 potential things that you had to have for life. Where's that list at right now?
Well, we have it archived at reasons.org/fine-tuning with a dash between the fine and the tuning.
Okay.
If you go there, up will pop a 300-page compendium, which documents over 800 different features of Earth and our solar system that must be fine-tuned to make life possible here on planet Earth.
Must.
And as we look elsewhere in our galaxy, as we look elsewhere in the galaxies that make up the universe, everywhere we look, we see hostile conditions for advanced life. And, you know, my peers who are not Christians will recognize that, well, maybe we might find a place where bacteria might exist for a few months, but everywhere we look, we see environments that are hostile for advanced life. We can't even find a twin of the sun. So for 50 years, my peers have been looking throughout our galaxy, trying to find a star sufficiently like the sun that it could be a candidate to have a planet orbiting it on which advanced life exists. We don't find one. Lots of stars are twins of one another, but our star's sun does not have a twin.
Wow. That's interesting. Now, you always hear in the headlines, oh, we found another one of Earth's brothers and sisters, another one of Earth's twins out there, way far away. What do they mean by that?
Well, what they mean is they found a planet in the water habitable zone, which would mean that the planet is orbiting about its star where the temperature on the surface of the planet conceivably could be such that liquid water could exist on that planet. It doesn't mean they detected liquid water. They simply have found a planet with the, quote, right temperature. Now, what's not revealed to the public is that there are 8 known habitable zones. We got the water habitable zone, we got the ultraviolet habitable zone, the astrosphere habitable zone, and 5 others.
Galactic.
And these zones don't overlap. I mean, if you want life on a planet, all 8 zones have to overlap. And of the 3,000 planets we know exists, the only one in the list where all 8 overlap is the one that you and I are sitting on.
Wow.
All the rest of the planets, the habitable zones don't overlap. So we've not yet found a truly habitable planet.
Now, if you were a gambler, you'd say that this was a pretty unlikely scenario, and you wouldn't bet on life happening.
I wouldn't bet on life existing elsewhere in the universe, because everywhere we look, I mean, for example, you have to have the just right galaxy. 200 features of our galaxy must be highly fine-tuned for advanced life to be possible in that galaxy. I mean, if you watch Star Wars, it says a galaxy far, far away. Well, we astronomers have looked far, far away. We don't see any candidates.
Right, yeah.
Milky Way is the only one.
Right, you mentioned you have to have the right galaxy cluster type. You have to have the right comet inflow ratio. You have to tell us about Mars. Why is Mars important?
Well, for example, you need the 4 gas giant planets to have exactly the masses and the orbits that they have, so that we don't get too many collisions from asteroids and comets, but nor do we get too few. Now, if it wasn't for Mars and Venus and Mercury, we would be suffering from mean motion resonances, which would disturb the orbit of planet Earth. Thanks to the small planets, they're exactly positioned with just the right orbits that they break up the mean motion resonances that are generated by Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. So yeah, when our family celebrates Thanksgiving, we thank God for Neptune, because without Neptune, we wouldn't be able to enjoy our dinner. Woo. We thank God for Venus. We thank God for all 8 planets.
I mean, when you think about this, you're really talking about a universe that is finely tuned and not one that's haphazardly put together, or not one that was randomly produced.
Well, often people ask me, if God wanted life on planet Earth, why did he make such an enormous universe? Well, I explained to them that the universe must be exactly the mass that it is and exactly the size that it is, so that you can have one planet in which life exists. So the entire mass of the universe is exquisitely fine-tuned to make life possible.
And that's amazing.
God did this so much, he thought it was worthwhile to build 50 billion trillion stars so we could have a nice place to live.
That is amazing.
That is awesome.
And it's not just the astronomical events outside of us, it's also our location in time. I mean, we have these millions of years leading up to before God actually placed human beings, Homo sapiens here, where it's just the right time for us to be able to have technology, to be able to perceive the universe as it is. I mean, that's a big deal too, right?
Well, both of you are pastors. I'm a pastor as well. And one thing that might excite you is that 9,000 years ago, our planet Earth entered an extremely stable climate stability, which allowed billions of people to live on the planet at one time. In the entire history of the Earth, the only time our planet had the conditions to allow more than 1 billion humans to exist is the last 9,000 years. And it's temporary. It's only going to last for a maximum of 1,500 more years.
Yeah.
And so literally we see the whole universe, and our Earth is designed to make possible the redemption of billions of human beings.
Amen.
Because as you see in Revelation 7:9, the number of the redeemed host will be an uncountable number, which means our planet must be designed in such a way that it can sustain at one time billions of human beings. And so the next book I'm bringing out, Improbable Planet, tells the story of how God carefully fashioned the earth over billions of years to open up this tiny window, 10,000 years wide, in which billions of us could live on the planet at the same time, and develop the technology where we could actually communicate the gospel to the entire world. Humans lived during the last ice age, but the climate was so unstable that the population couldn't grow and technology couldn't be developed.
We were just talking about that before the show started. One of the times in the past we had you on, you mentioned that about how this would be another 1,500 years or so, and technology couldn't exist the same way as it does now, and all. I mean, the gospel message spreading couldn't have happened 12,000 years ago, 13,000 years ago.
What I find interesting in reading the creation texts in the Bible, every major creation text links the doctrine of creation to the doctrine of redemption.
Yeah.
The Bible communicates that everything God creates is for the purpose of redemption. Every star, every bacterium, every fly plays a role in making possible the redemption of all the human beings God intends to reach.
Except maybe mosquitoes.
Mosquitoes too. You need them as well.
Okay, all right, mosquitoes too.
To show why we should thank God for mosquitoes.
Right.
Yes, maybe we'll have to have you back and we'll do a whole show on mosquitoes or something. But all right, hey, you know what? This has been astounding. I mean, God has finally tuned our planet. God has finally tuned our universe. We are at the exact right moment in history, and the non-physical realm is real. There's really stuff going on in there. So, Dr. Ross, thanks for joining us today and giving us your thoughts on alien encounters and the fine-tuning of the world.
You're welcome.
All right, Dave, It's been a pleasure working with you again.
Yep.
Where should people go right now?
TruthRevolution.tv, and they can go to Reasons.org.
Yeah, that's right. And we're going to link to everything we mentioned here. If you go to TruthRevolution.tv, we're going to link to Reasons.org. We're also going to link you to that book Hugh mentioned, the Dinosaur Blood Book by Fuzz Rana. We're also going to link to some of Dr. Ross's other books, some of my favorites, The Hidden Treasures in the Book of Job, and Why the Universe is the Way It Is. Actually, he just said a lot of stuff from that book.
Right.
So good stuff. You need to get those books. They're really, really good information. Thanks again for joining us. Thanks again for listening, everyone. Have a great week, and God bless.